Good morning, Year 8. We're going to look at Queen Victoria today. Let's just have a quick recap of some things. So remember, when you see this symbol, you need to be on form, so you need to make sure you check your email and you've got the email open with the link, or you can get that at the end of the lesson. If you see this one, you're doing some work. If you see this one, you're correcting your work, you're checking your work. First thing I'd like you to do is date title. I don't know what the date is, because I don't know when you're doing it. The title is Queen Victoria, and I just need 1 to 5 and just 5 short little answers in your books on these. If you've not got your book, paper's fine. Let's get that done, please. Let's go. Our objectives for today. So we are ordering the key events of Queen Victoria's life into chronological order. So we're going to make sure we can track how her life unfolded and how her life changed. I want us to be able to identify the key moments. What were the important moments? What were the sort of turning points of her life? And then I want us to finally explain why Victoria is worth remembering. Let's flick over to the next slide. Let's change our pen. Let's do some self-assessment. So India, okay, was known as the jewel in the crown. Okay, Australia was originally, when we first took control of it, was used as a home for convicts. Remember, it's where we sent our prisoners. It was a penal colony. It was a penalty to be sent there. Okay, which nowadays we think that's crazy. We'd love to go to Australia, but originally it was a penal colony. It was somewhere like a big prison. Anson reformed the British Navy. We looked at this last week. Byng, when he lost Minorca, was shot by a firing squad upon his return. And this links in a bit with your geography this week. British colonies, in America were originally known as the 13 colonies. That links back to our slavery topic, but also what we're looking at in geography with myself this week as well. Right, what I need you to do is just write down these 3 key words: imperialism, a national policy of pursuing, expanding, and celebrating an empire. Okay, so we go through an imperial period during this time. Great Exhibition, international exhibition celebrating industry and culture, held in 1851. And then the Crystal Palace, which is a large iron and glass structure built in Hyde Park in 1851. Right, I'm going to read to you for the next few slides. You're going to need to listen, because the information that's going to be on the slide is you're going to need to write down in a minute. Now, if you've not got the piece of paper in front of you, when I set the task in a minute, you can skip back and you can rewind back and you've got it all on the screen. If you've got the piece of paper in front of you, fantastic. If you've not, the reason I've scanned it in is so you can see it and you can join in the lesson fully. Let's go. Queen Victoria inherited the throne from her uncle William IV in 1837. She was just 18 years old and stood at 4 foot 11 inches. So she's not a tall lady. Okay, I'm not very tall. I'm about 5 foot 6. Okay, and she's 4 foot 11. She is a small lady. Many members of the royal court hoped to rule on the young queen's behalf, in particular her overbearing mother, the Duchess of Kent. But Victoria was an independent-minded queen and immediately took charge of her royal affairs. Okay, so she's only 18, but she's exerting her power. She wants to be queen. She's not letting somebody push her around. In 1840, Queen Victoria married her first cousin, a German prince named Albert. Victoria and Albert loved each other deeply, and they had 9 children together over the next 17 years. Albert took a particular interest in industry and political reform, and Victoria placed a lot of trust in his political judgment. Don't need to worry about that there. Okay, so she trusted him, and they really did love each other. It was a really special relationship. Okay, now it says here that they're first cousins. Marriage at the time, okay, for monarchs and kings and queens, you could only marry somebody who was equal to you, okay, or somebody who was, as important as you. So lots of monarchs sort of married cousins, and this created some problems that we'll look at in year 9. Queen Victoria set about restoring public faith in the royal family, which had become very unpopular during the reign of her Hanoverian uncles. Victoria toured Britain on the newly invented steam train, became a patron of numerous institutions. So a patron, she became a supporter, okay, of numerous institutions, numerous groups, numerous charities, and presented the royal family as an ordinary and loving family unit. So she made people realise, she made people of the nation fall in love with the monarchy, okay, which is really impressive. However, tragedy struck in 1861 when Prince Albert died, just aged 42. Queen Victoria was paralysed by sadness and disappeared from public life for the next 10 years. The British public began to turn against their absent queen, who they nicknamed the Widow of Windsor. So when Albert died, she was so grief-stricken, she kind of withdrew from public life. She spent her time in Windsor Castle, which is why she became known as the Widow of Windsor. And the public started to think, well, she's not doing anything, okay? And they started to turn against her, okay, because she was an absent queen. Queen Victoria slowly returned to public life during the 1870s. She was reinvigorated Reinvigorated means like brought back to life by her responsibilities as queen. Took a particular interest in the British Empire. In 1876, Victoria's favourite Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, convinced her to adopt the title Empress of India. Though Victoria never visited India, the region fascinated her. One of Victoria's favourite companions was an Indian servant named Abdul Karim, who instructed her in Indian affairs and taught her phrases in Urdu and Hindi. So she takes this title, this name of the Empress of India, and falls in love with India. She never goes, but she loves the idea of it. And the way she gets to find out everything about it is through this servant named Abdul Karim, who lives in the same sort of court and spends his time around her. And he teaches her what India was like, how Indians did things, but also teaches her some of the language. Okay, now India has lots of different languages, but the two of the most common are Urdu and Hindi, and she learns some phrases of these. She never uses them over there, but she learns them to show she's interested. By the end of the 19th century, Victoria had come to symbolise the British Empire, a living embodiment of Britannia. If we remember Britannia from a few lessons ago, she was that strong lady who's on the other side of the 50p. So you've got the Queen's head on one side and then the lady in the carriage looking strong with the trident in one hand. Okay, so that's the weapon that's associated with fighting at sea, fighting at sea in naval mythology to the sea. And then the olive branch in the other, which is the symbol of peace. Okay, so she represents and she becomes Britannia. We talked about that song last lesson, Rule Britannia. Okay, she is the Queen Victoria is the living embodiment of Britannia. Across the world, hospitals, universities, cities, waterfalls, and entire provinces still bear her name. Okay, I'm just thinking now. There's Victoria Falls in Africa. There's a place in Australia called Victoria. There's loads of places that are named and bear her name as sort of a symbol, as a tribute to her. Queen Victoria's influence on public life was so great that the character and outlook for 19th century Britain, from its emphasis on moral uprightness to confidence in empire and belief in progress, became known as Victorian. So the whole period becomes known as the Victorian period, and it's characterised by this moral uprightness, so you must behave this way. It's confidence, it's belief in empire. We are the British, we should have an empire. And it's belief in progress, we should push things forward, okay, because we're the British, and this is what it is to be a Victorian. Now, I've spoke at you for a bit there, and what I need you to do is go through and start filling in this timeline. Okay, I've highlighted the years as we go through. Some of them you won't be able to do yet, so just write them down on your piece of paper, okay, and leave them blank as you come back, as you unpause the video, okay. I'll talk through them, and hopefully we'll get them all filled in by the end of this video. Let's carry on. The British public began to take a much closer interest in the British Empire during Queen Victoria's reign. Much of this was due to technological improvements. Travel to the colonies became far quicker from the 1840s onwards due to the steamship. By 1880, almost 100,000 miles of telegraph cable had been laid beneath the ocean, giving people in Britain near instant communication with its colonies. Okay, now you guys take this for granted because we've got the internet. We can speak via Skype. You can be taught from home. Before 1880, you'd have to write a letter. You'd have to wait for somebody to carry that letter. Okay, and that would take weeks, maybe even months. Okay, by 1880, you're almost getting instant communication. It's not quite instant, but it's nearly, which is a crazy change. Okay, and this is a really important change that transforms people's understanding of the world. The world is obviously still the same size, but they say the world is shrinking, okay, because it's easier to get around. British newspapers could offer up-to-date reports on British army campaigns in faraway locations, such as Afghanistan, Burma, and the Sudan. And they did so with great excitement. It became a really interesting thing. Oh, what's happening over there? What's happening there? Okay, because the newspapers were reporting it, people found out. Celebrated British Army officers such as Gordon of Khartoum became household names. An army nurse named Florence Nightingale. We talk about her now. The Nightingale hospitals are the emergency hospitals that have been created, named after her. Devised innovations to improve conditions for British soldiers injured whilst fighting in the Crimea. The Crimea is near Russia, and she looked at the conditions of the hospital and said they need to be cleaner. Okay, and therefore, as a result of the hospitals being cleaner, more people's lives were saved. As a result, she became one of the most celebrated figures in Victorian Britain. And as I said, she's still celebrated today. Another hero of the empire was the Christian missionary David Livingstone, who explored much of southern Africa during the 1850s and 60s. During the late 19th century, many people began to believe that they had the right to rule other nations due to their racial superiority. Native populations, be they Maoris, Bengalis, or Zulus, were frequently likened to the children or labelled savages. A distorted version of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was used to argue that British Anglo-Saxons were superior in intelligence and morality to the races they governed. So, as I've said before, the mentality of the British also changes. They start to believe it's their right. Okay? As civilized British people or civilized British Anglo-Saxons, okay, you start to say that they had superior intelligence and better morality, and they needed to teach and tame the races they found against. This is a hugely wrong belief, okay, and it's not something that we agree with nowadays, but this is the belief at the time, and the Victorians believed that it was their racial superiority that allowed them to behave the way they did. In 1897, Queen Victoria, so again, thinking about your timeline, hopefully you've got their numbers written down, Queen Victoria celebrated her Diamond Jubilee. A great procession travelled through London with representatives from across the empire, included Canadian hussars, Cypriot policemen in fezzes, and Maharajas of Hindu princely states. 4 years later, Queen Victoria died, aged 81. So you might need to do some maths here, mightn't you? Okay, to finish off your timeline. Okay, but she celebrates her Diamond Jubilee with a huge procession, and 4 years later she dies. When Queen Victoria died, she was Britain's oldest and longest reigning monarch. This was quite an achievement considering that she had survived at least 6 assassination attempts during her lifetime. One last thing to talk about. The Great Exhibition in 1851, Prince Albert helped organise an international exhibition celebrating industry and manufacturing. The Great Exhibition was housed in a temporary building in Hyde Park, constructed from a cast iron frame and 294,000 panes of glass named the Crystal Palace. So there was so much glass it looked like a big crystal. The completed building was 108 feet tall. The Great Exhibition contained 100,000 different exhibits from around the world, including the folding piano, the world's largest diamond, and early prototypes of the bicycle and typewriter. 6 million people visited the exhibition from Britain and abroad. Okay, that is a huge number. Okay, people from all over the country are travelling towards London. See here for a minute, just pause for a minute and see if you can remember what they're using to get there. We talked about it earlier. Many taking day trips to London along the newly built railway lines. On the 1st of May 1851, Queen Victoria opened the exhibition. She recorded in her diary, "This is one of the greatest and most glorious of our lives." So this exhibition was the biggest sort of celebration of power. Look at all these amazing things that we can bring to Britain. Okay, we must be a really powerful country if we can bring all these things to Britain. Now, a couple of pictures show you what it looked like. This is sort of an artist's impression of it. A huge building. Would have cost a fortune to make with all that glass, would have been very difficult to put together, but again, it reflects Britain's power. The fact that we can build something like this and fill it with all these things shows how powerful, shows how influential we were. And then finally, this is what it looked like inside. You've got loads and loads of exhibits, exhibitions, arts, science, everything you can imagine, just showing off the world. Okay? You don't need to travel around the whole world because the whole world has come to England. The whole world has come to Britain because Britain is so powerful it can sort of invite it and it wants to come. Right, so now you need to make sure you've got that email from your teacher, okay, which has the link in it. It's got the link to your group's forms quiz, okay. So again, we've got that symbol there, which means we're online, we're on our phones, on our computers. You've got 7 simple questions and 3 developed answers. Question 1. How did technological change alter the British public awareness of empire? Question 2. How did theories of racial supremacy change attitudes towards British Empire? And question 3. Queen Victoria should be remembered fondly. So fondly means positively. Okay, we should remember in a good way because. Okay, so let's stop there for a second and I'll pop some sentence starters on the board. So this slide here has some sentence starters on it that you can use. Let's go for it. Excellent work, guys. That is us done for today. Let's go. Bye.